There will come a moment when your life begins to rise quietly. Opportunities will start to appear. People will begin to notice, and the energy around you will change. You'll feel it before anyone else does. A calm confidence replaces the old anxiety. The weight you used to carry begins to fall away. It's prosperity arriving, not just in money, but in peace, in clarity, in purpose. And in that sacred moment, silence will become your greatest protection. When God sends prosperity, it rarely comes with noise. It doesn't arrive through shouting or proving. It comes softly, like dawn light through a window. The same people who once pitied you will start asking questions. The same voices that doubted you will suddenly grow curious. But this time you won't need to explain anything. Your results will speak, and your peace will guard them. Because true prosperity doesn't need validation, it needs vigilance. You learned this the hard way. You told your dreams to people who couldn't see them. You shared your plans with those who didn't pray for your success. You celebrated too early with hearts that weren't happy for you. And every time something went wrong, it wasn't coincidence, it was correction. God was teaching you the psychology of silence, that blessings breathe best in privacy. There's power in stillness when your season shifts. The mind that once fought for recognition now craves peace. You realize that not everyone can handle your harvest. Some will admire it, some will envy it, and some will try to interrupt it. So you choose quiet. You let God reveal what needs to be seen, and you guard what must remain unseen. That's wisdom, that's maturity, that's divine strategy. Prosperity is not just what enters your life, it's what you protect once it does. The same silence that covered your struggle must now cover your success. Because when God elevates you, He expects discretion. And the wiser you become, the less you say. Do you feel that shift already? The pull towards stillness, the knowing that not everything deserves your announcement? That's your spirit preparing for promotion. Stay quiet, stay grounded, because when prosperity comes, your silence will be the shield that keeps it safe. Prosperity does not test your hunger. It tests your humility. It is not about whether you can receive a blessing. It is about whether you can hold one without letting it change who you are. You see, when God begins to prosper you, the world reacts. People notice what they didn't notice before. Their tone changes. Their eyes linger. Their questions carry weight. Suddenly, the same silence that once made you invisible becomes your armor. Because prosperity makes noise, and noise attracts attention. Some pure, some poisoned. This is where wisdom becomes your guardian. You have spent years learning how to survive scarcity. You know how to stretch, how to pray, how to wait, but now the test is different. Now you must learn how to handle abundance without leaking your peace. Prosperity has a rhythm, a psychology, a discipline. It rewards focus and punishes exposure. You can't share everything you see, and you can't announce everything God whispers. Some things must be protected in prayer until they are strong enough to stand in public. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. The human mind often wants to announce progress to validate itself. We post, we tell, we share, because deep down we still crave acknowledgement. But acknowledgement feeds the ego, not the spirit. And when ego takes over, blessings shrink. That's why the wise stay silent in their blooming. They understand that protection is not secrecy, it's stewardship. When God starts to bless you, it feels like stepping into a new vibration. Suddenly you're calmer, you don't need to rush. The same things that used to excite you now simply confirm what you already knew. That timing was never the problem. Preparation was. Prosperity doesn't come when you shout. It comes when you're still enough to hear instruction. And when it arrives, it will always require silence, because silence gives you space to process, to plan, to position. Psychologically, silence rewires your focus. When you talk less, you perceive more. When you stop defending your vision, your mind stops wasting energy on disbelief. You start to hear what matters. You begin to notice what peace feels like, how clarity breathes, how God's voice sounds when you're not explaining yourself to everyone else. The more you protect your mental space, the more creative energy flows through you. That's prosperity at its purest level, not material first, but mental. Think about how many times in the past your excitement exposed you too early. You shared a dream and suddenly felt resistance. You celebrated a plan and watched it unravel. That's not bad luck. That's spiritual psychology. Energy moves towards silence. What you talk about too soon loses power because words release energy, and sometimes the world isn't ready for what you're birthing. Even positive people can project their own limits onto your unlimited vision. So God trains you to move in quiet obedience. You act, not announce. You progress, not perform. And when that happens, life becomes beautifully simple. You begin to realize that you no longer owe anyone an explanation for your peace. You don't need to justify your rest. You don't need to defend your blessings. The same people who once questioned your faith will see your fruits, and they'll understand. But by then, you'll be too focused on gratitude to even notice who's watching. That's the psychology of mature prosperity. You stop needing to prove, and you start learning to preserve. You stop chasing applause, and you start chasing alignment. You move from public ambition to private fulfillment. And the truth is, the quieter you become, the louder God's work becomes through you. The same silence they once mistook for weakness becomes the sound of wisdom. It takes great discipline to stay silent when everything in you wants to speak. It's easy to share progress when you're excited, but the wise know that growth hidden is growth protected. In silence, you're free to refine without interference. You can listen to divine direction without outer noise. You can adjust, course correct, and grow roots before you bloom. Every great structure begins underground, where no one claps, but that's where strength is built. So if you feel unseen right now, it's not punishment, it's preservation. You are being shielded, not silenced. You're being refined in privacy before God releases you in public. And when that release happens, your peace will be your language. Your results will speak, and your silence will echo louder than any announcement could. Remember this: prosperity handled without peace becomes pressure. Prosperity handled with peace becomes power. And peace always lives in silence. When you stop needing the world's validation, you become unstoppable. Because the moment you stop explaining yourself, you start experiencing yourself. Do you understand now why God hid you for so long? Because He knew when the blessing comes, it will need protection, not presentation. So He trained you to love quiet, to master composure, to build strength in secret. Now, when prosperity comes, your silence won't just be a habit. It will be your shield, your strategy, your secret weapon. There is a sacred balance between revelation and restraint. When God begins to move in your life, your first instinct might be to tell the world, to shout, "It's finally happening." But divine psychology teaches something deeper, that revelation without readiness attracts resistance. Every time you expose what is not yet fully formed, you invite forces that can distort it. That's why prosperity comes wrapped in silence. It's heaven's way of saying, "This one guard closely." You see, prosperity is not loud because True growth doesn't need validation. The seed doesn't announce that it's sprouting. The flower doesn't warn the soil it's about to bloom. Everything divine grows quietly, protected by its own patience. And that's how you must handle this next season of your life. Stay quiet until the roots are deep enough to withstand the wind. Move in wisdom, not reaction. Don't confuse exposure with elevation. One feeds the ego, the other feeds the spirit. Psychologically, silence shifts your internal power. When you don't feel the need to prove anything, you free your mind from the chains of external validation. The modern world thrives on noise, constant sharing, constant opinions, constant distraction. But peace, true prosperity, is born in stillness. When you remain silent, your energy consolidates. You stop scattering your focus, stop defending your direction, and begin directing your destiny. Every great thinker, every spiritually mature soul has understood this truth. Growth is private before it is public. Many people lose their blessings because they announce them too soon. They mistake visibility for victory. They think telling others makes it more real. But the opposite is true. The moment you give something sacred to the public, you risk it being handled by unclean hands. Not everyone will celebrate your success. Some will study it to compete with it. Others will question it to weaken it. That's why God teaches silence through delay. He's showing you how to enjoy prosperity without explaining it. There's a quiet authority that comes with inner peace. You begin to realize you don't have to argue about your path anymore. You don't have to prove that your decisions are divine. You stop sharing your every move because you've learned that energy flows where attention goes, and not all attention is kind. Instead, you conserve that energy for what truly matters: building, healing, evolving, and listening. The truth is, silence protects not only your prosperity, but also your psychology. When you're quiet, you begin to notice subtleties, how people respond when you succeed, how some go silent, not because they're busy, but because your light unsettles their shadows. Silence allows discernment to grow. You start to feel who is for you and who is simply familiar. You begin to value solitude, not as loneliness, but as luxury. Because not every space deserves your spirit, and not every conversation deserves your peace. When prosperity comes, your silence becomes a filter. It reveals who truly supports you. The ones who love you won't need explanations. They'll sense your shift and celebrate you without question. The ones who envy you will demand access, demand details, demand stories, and your silence will expose them. The less you say, the more truth you see. In psychology, there's a term called selective attention. It means your brain chooses what to focus on while filtering out what distracts. Spiritual silence works the same way. You choose where your focus goes. You stop feeding the noise and start feeding the purpose. That's how you multiply peace. The less you speak, the more power your words hold when you finally do. This is why wise souls speak little and do much. The louder your life becomes, the quieter your mouth must be. Because prosperity without discipline invites danger. You must guard your mental peace the same way a king guards his crown. Not out of fear, but out of respect for what it took to earn it. Ask yourself this quietly. What in your life right now needs protection through silence? Maybe it's an idea that's too fresh to share. Maybe it's a goal that's still fragile. Maybe it's a prayer that's not yet ready to be public. Whatever it is, keep it between you and God. Let it mature in the soil of silence. Because when prosperity is sent by God, it's meant to serve a purpose beyond status. It's meant to bless without boasting, to influence without inflating. Silence becomes your spiritual armor, not because you're hiding, but because you're honoring. Prosperity grows stronger in places where it's protected, not promoted. There will come a moment when speaking is right, when your story will serve as light to others, but not yet. Now is the season of sacred privacy. Move quietly, build quietly, heal quietly. Let your silence announce what your words never could. Because the strongest voice you'll ever have is not the one that speaks. It's the one that stays silent in wisdom. That's when prosperity matures. That's when protection becomes power. There's a transformation that happens when prosperity stops being something you chase and starts becoming something you embody. It's the moment when wealth shifts from your hands to your heart, from the material to the mental, from noise to knowing. You realize prosperity is not about having more, it's about needing less. It's not about collecting, but about connecting to peace, to gratitude, to purpose. And when that realization takes root, silence becomes not just your protection, but your proof of wisdom. Because here's the truth. Abundance without awareness is emptiness. You can have every door open and still feel lost if your mind hasn't learned how to live in peace. Prosperity begins within, not without. The outer blessings are only reflections of the inner stability you've built in secret. The car, the house, the recognition, they're echoes of an inner shift that happened long before the applause. You stopped living in fear. You stopped begging for validation. You started listening to the quiet voice within that said, "You're enough," even before the evidence. Psychologically, this is one of the most powerful transitions a human being can experience when external success no longer defines internal peace. The anxious striving fades. The endless comparing ends. You begin to move from survival energy to serenity energy. You wake up without needing to prove your worth. You walk through rooms no longer analyzing who sees you, but rather who you can bless. That is the mind of prosperity, and it speaks softly. You'll know you've entered this stage when you no longer argue. You'll feel it in the way you respond to criticism, calm, centered, unmoved. You won't feel the need to correct lies or chase explanations. Silence will feel more powerful than any defense. You'll understand that the same God who lifted you will defend you. You'll see that real power doesn't argue, it aligns. And as your peace deepens, you'll start to notice prosperity showing up in unexpected ways. Not just in finances, but in time, in health, in relationships that feel nourishing instead of draining, in mornings where you wake up calm instead of anxious. You'll look around and realize that the things you once begged for have become your normal, not because you forced them, but because you finally became someone who could hold them. When God sends prosperity, it often starts as an inward renovation. He clears out old thinking patterns, fear, guilt, self-doubt, because those cannot coexist with divine abundance. That's why some seasons felt lonely. That's why certain people drifted away. Prosperity couldn't flow through clutter. Your silence wasn't isolation, it was purification. God was detoxing your soul to make room for peace. You might not have seen it at first. You thought you were losing. You thought you were being punished. But now you see it, that the pruning was part of the prosperity. The cutting back wasn't cruelty, it was cultivation. You can't grow fruit without trimming branches. You can't evolve without letting go. And so God removed what would have ruined your peace. People, habits, environments, distractions, because peace is the highest currency in the kingdom. This is the part of prosperity most people don't understand. It doesn't always arrive with more noise, more people, or more visibility. Sometimes prosperity looks like fewer opinions, fewer arguments, fewer expectations. It's when your life becomes lighter, not because you have everything, but because you've released everything that isn't aligned. In psychology, there's a term called emotional minimalism, the practice of removing unnecessary emotional clutter so the mind can breathe. That's what divine prosperity does. It declutters your soul. It teaches you to value energy over attention, peace over presence, silence over spotlight. You no longer rush to explain or convince. You become selective, not out of arrogance, but awareness. You've learned that peace is fragile and anything that costs it is too expensive. You start to move differently. You walk slower, but with more intention. You speak less, but with more weight. Your smile becomes quiet, confidence instead of polite performance. You're no longer performing your purpose, you're living it. You don't seek to impress, you seek to impact. Prosperity changes your posture. You start holding your blessings gently instead of gripping them tightly. You start to rest in faith instead of wrestle with fear. Do you feel that shift happening even now? That's what peace feels like when it settles into your bones. You don't just believe you're blessed, you know it. You feel it. You live it. You stop narrating your miracles and start nurturing them. You protect them in silence because you've learned that not everything sacred should be spoken. And then something beautiful happens. Your silence becomes contagious. People around you start calming down too. They notice your energy, your stability, your unshakable peace. Without saying a word, you become a walking example of grace under pressure. That's prosperity at its highest vibration, when your presence speaks louder than your voice. So understand this. The purpose of prosperity is not to make you loud. It's to make you luminous. It's not to make you popular. It's to make you peaceful. You are stepping into a kind of wealth that money can't measure. The wealth of a rested mind, a healed heart, and a clear soul. And for that, silence isn't just protection. It's worship. There's a law of life that few understand until prosperity reveals it. Not everyone who claps for you is happy for you. Not everyone who smiles at your success can handle your light. And this is why silence becomes your sanctuary. When God begins to elevate you, He also exposes who was connected to your struggle, but not your strength. The moment blessings begin to manifest, motives start to surface. Prosperity doesn't just reward you, it reveals everything around you. When you were waiting, people saw you as safe. Your humility made them comfortable. But the moment you start to rise, something shifts. The same peace that once drew them to you now intimidates them. The same quiet confidence that once inspired them now makes them question their own reflection. Prosperity changes the atmosphere, not because you've changed, but because it shows who truly values you versus who only valued your silence when it served their ego. That's why when God sends prosperity, He also commands discretion. You'll feel it in your spirit, a gentle instruction saying, don't tell them yet. Not out of fear, but out of protection. Because every blessing carries an assignment, and every assignment requires alignment. You can't share everything you see with those who haven't done the work to see it clearly. Sometimes your silence is not about secrecy, it's about spiritual safety. Psychologically, humans project their internal state onto others. A heart full of insecurity will interpret your peace as pride. A mind rooted in scarcity will misread your success as superiority. And that's why silence becomes wisdom, because it refuses to feed misunderstanding. You don't owe explanations to people who haven't earned access to your process. Prosperity teaches emotional detachment, not from love, but from expectation. You begin to love purely without needing permission. You give freely without seeking approval. You bless quietly, knowing heaven is keeping score. This new phase of your journey will be beautiful, but it will also be lonely. Because abundance has altitude, and not everyone can breathe at high levels. Some relationships will fade naturally. Others will distance themselves without warning. Don't chase them. Let silence close the chapter with grace. God is pruning again, not to punish you, but to preserve your peace. Prosperity requires boundaries. Without them, blessings turn into burdens. It's a strange paradox. You prayed for more, and now that you have it, you speak less. But that's how maturity sounds. You no longer announce your moves because you understand that revelation has responsibility. You no longer seek to convince people because truth doesn't need defenders. You no longer explain your choices because peace doesn't debate, it discerns. You'll notice this in your spirit. Where you once wanted to impress, you now want to inspire. Where you once wanted to prove, you now want to protect. Where you once spoke to be understood, you now remain silent to stay aligned. That is psychological evolution. The person who once needed applause has evolved into someone who only needs awareness. When prosperity comes, so does attention. Attention is energy, and not every energy is pure. That's why silence keeps your blessing covered. You don't have to post every win. You don't have to justify every decision. Learn to enjoy victories privately. Learn to let success whisper instead of shout. Those who are truly meant to celebrate with you will sense your joy without you having to display it. The mind at peace no longer rushes to be seen. It becomes content in being understood by God alone. That's real prosperity, the kind that doesn't crave eyes. It craves alignment. The kind that doesn't shout, "Look at me," but quietly says, "Thank you." Gratitude has a sound, and it's silence. Ask yourself right now, what is God teaching me through this silence? Maybe He's showing you that not all growth needs an audience. Maybe He's preparing you for blessings too sacred for public view. Maybe He's reminding you that humility sustains what pride can't handle. You're entering the phase where peace must be prioritized over popularity, where quiet must be chosen over validation. Because the truth is, not everyone deserves access to your atmosphere. Some people drain what God is trying to fill. Silence becomes your boundary, your filter, your fence of faith. This doesn't mean isolation. It means insulation. You're not cutting people off. You're cutting noise out. You're not withdrawing from life. You're withdrawing from distraction. That's how prosperity is preserved. The more you protect your peace, the more power you have to pour. The quieter you are, the clearer you hear direction. You are no longer living to be understood. You're living to be effective. That's what prosperity changes. It's not about accumulation. It's about awareness. You become intentional with your words, your time, your circle. You realize not every battle deserves your energy. Not every conversation deserves your opinion. And not every invitation deserves your presence. Silence sharpens discernment, and discernment sustains destiny. And when you master that balance, when you can celebrate without showing, love without needing, give without bragging, you've stepped into divine prosperity. That's when silence no longer feels like withholding. It feels like wisdom. Because when God sends prosperity, your silence doesn't just protect your blessing, it perfects your peace. There will come a morning when you'll open your eyes and realize you've finally arrived, not to a place, but to a state of being. You'll feel light, unbothered, and deeply anchored in peace. You won't wake up reaching for your phone, chasing validation or measuring progress. You'll just breathe, smile, and know that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. That's prosperity in its purest form. You won't even notice it happening at first because it doesn't arrive with noise. Prosperity walks in gently, like dawn light filtering through the window. It doesn't ask for attention, it asks for appreciation. You'll realize that God didn't just send wealth, He sent wholeness. You'll look around your life and see how the once frantic energy of striving has transformed into the quiet rhythm of gratitude. The same silence that used to feel like waiting now feels like worship. The same calm that once felt like emptiness now feels like abundance. You see, prosperity is not about what's added to your life, it's about what's removed. The anxiety is gone. The self-doubt has faded. The constant need to explain yourself has dissolved. You don't rush anymore. You don't force what's not meant for you. You've learned that timing isn't your enemy, it's your ally. You've learned that silence isn't punishment, it's protection. You've learned that peace is prosperity. Psychologically, the highest state of success is inner calm. When the mind no longer fights itself, every outer thing begins to align. You used to chase blessings. Now blessings chase you. You used to speak to be heard. Now your presence speaks louder than words. You used to fight to be seen. Now you're content being guided. This is the quiet power of those who walk with purpose. They don't need to announce it, they simply become it. When people ask you how you got here, you'll smile. You won't list your achievements or recount your sacrifices. You'll simply say, God taught me to be quiet, and that will be enough. Because silence was never about hiding. It was about healing. It was where you learned to hear God more clearly, where you learned that the loudest victories are often the ones nobody sees. And yes, people will notice. They'll see how peaceful you've become, how stable you stand, how light your energy feels. Some will admire it, others will misunderstand it, but you won't defend it. Because the moment you start explaining peace, you lose it. You'll just keep walking, grounded, grateful, graceful. You'll understand that not everyone can join you here, because peace lives at a frequency that chaos cannot breathe in. There's a quote that says, don't tell people what God is doing until they can see it for themselves. You are now living that truth. Your silence is no longer a cage, it's a crown. It's how you carry the weight of wisdom without breaking under it. Every closed-mouth moment, every unseen prayer, every humble not yet led you to this peace. God trusted you with silence because He knew prosperity would require strength, not to shout, but to stay still. And that's how He works. He hides you in humility, then crowns you in clarity. He teaches you patience in darkness, then reveals your purpose in light. He removes people who could not handle your elevation, then fills your circle with those who can protect it. And through it all, He whispers, don't speak yet, let me show them. So now when you rise quietly. You succeed without noise. You bless without bragging. You give without announcement. You build without boasting. Because the moment you start to explain what only grace could do, you make it smaller. You've learned that your silence glorifies God more than your speeches ever could. This is prosperity. This is peace. This is the reward of those who learn to wait without complaining, to grow while broadcasting, and to trust without talking. You've made it through the valley of doubt into the garden of gratitude. You've gone from restless to rooted, from chasing to choosing, from noise to knowing, and now heaven smiles because you finally understand. When God sends prosperity, your silence becomes your protection. Your peace becomes your proof. Your gratitude becomes your language. And your life becomes the message. So walk in quiet confidence. Guard your blessings with grace. And remember, you never lost anything by staying silent. You only protected everything worth keeping. The world may not understand it, but heaven applauds it. You've learned the greatest truth of all. Prosperity is not what you say, it's who you become when you no longer have to say anything.